we'll be getting those. So anything else before we get started?
Liz, we were talking about you having watched on Zoom some of my court proceedings. And for those of you who are tired of reruns, you certainly can Zoom into many courts around the country. But if you'd like to Zoom into mine, I'm starting a jury trial. I'm not sure if we're hoping to do jury selection this Friday, and it will go into next week. It's a pretty awful case. Wednesdays, I have motion day. You're going to hear all sorts of things from pleas, sentencings, motions, probation violations, all sorts of things. I have 100% criminal docket, which means at my level, it's felonies and the misdemeanors that come up. Misdemeanor is punishable by up to a year. Anything above that is a felony, and that's primarily what I deal with. So I have a lot of people Zooming in from all over the world, and I've put my Zoom number in the chat. We are Eastern time. And so we start about 9 o'clock. Sometimes it's a little later because I have meetings with attorneys and what have you. And sometimes we go into private sessions because there are non-public hearings, but we let you know. So if anytime you want to Zoom in and see real court 5 days a week, except for the rare occasion I take a vacation, I'm there and Zoom in.
Yeah, and I've sat through several of them. And so it's really fun to just watch you in your element and just watch how you run the courtroom. So I highly suggest doing that. So while we're talking about your role in the courtroom, do you mind talking about the types of cases that you see?
I see felonies. Some of them are low severity, and I see a lot of right now, especially with COVID, I'm seeing a lot of domestic violence, sexual assault of children, of spouses, of strangers, but not so much stranger danger. Right now, I'm seeing more of those you ought to be afraid of. And I'm seeing some robberies, I'm home invasions. I see the worst of the worst. So there's a lot of drunk driving. There is a lot of illegal drug use and the hardcore stuff. We're not talking marijuana. The laws have loosened up on that, and meth, I thought, had gone away because we passed new laws, and most states had, about the products that could be sold that you make meth from. But they've found a way around that. Some people are getting Sudafed and other drugs in the mail, and they're also using alternate products to make meth. Meth is on the rise, and it is horrifying. We are seeing a lot of deaths because there's not a lot of help out there. All of the medical people are overtaxed, the counselors, therapists, you can't even get in. A lot of the substance abuse places are closed. So we are seeing a lot of death due to drug overdose, heroin, etc. So I deal with that day in and day out. Child abuse is on the rise. It's always there, but now with COVID, especially being locked in, it was there, but people were saying, well, it's not really being reported. Well, of course not, because those people who are being abused were behind doors and there was nowhere to report it to. They couldn't leave. Now that there's more freedom, we are seeing a rise in that. And the horrifying things that people do to each other, I deal with on a daily basis. And it really is eye-opening. For me personally, my children can tell you that I'm the mom who does not let them go out. Like I do let them go out. But here's the thing is I want to know where they are, who they're with. I have specific times to pick them up. They have their cell phones. I check their cell phones to see who they're talking with. I don't give them the freedom that maybe I experienced as a child, because the things that I see today are mortifying. And there's a lot of human trafficking that is on the rise. I'm seeing a lot of that. So I see really the worst of the worst.
Wow. So you've been an inspiration to many people, with victims, but not only victims in the courtroom, but also, I would say, defendants even. You've had people come to your courtroom and follow up with you or talk to you about where they're at and how things they may have not liked you necessarily at that time, but they've really learned to have a lot of respect for you and stuff like that. What do you think that is?
Well, I think that you can all think back even just to the simple things you didn't want to do because your parents said, make your bed or come home at 9 or whatever they told you. And you thought, I don't want to do that. And then when you grew up, you thought, geez, I'm so thankful my parent told me that. What I do on the bench, I listen to defendants, and I want you all to think about this. It is not an hour television show. It's real life. And these people have a lot of issues, and they never had a mommy and daddy who said, you matter, I care about you, I love you, I will always be there. Many of them were told exactly the opposite. They grew up not just in poverty, but in a world where it was okay to be raped. It was okay to not go to school. It was okay to use drugs when you were, 9, 10, 11 years old. In fact, you were given them so then someone could rape you. So I always try to find the backstory. How can I help you? Right? What would you like me to know, and how can I help you? Not just with the victims, okay, but with the defendants, because the backstory then tells me how I can help them in terms of rehabilitation. Because if you think about it, most people get out of prison. They all get out of jail. Jail is only up to a year. Prison is over a year. Most people get out. And if we've treated them right and we tell them they can do better, I get countless letters saying, you were the first person that told me I mattered. I'm getting better because of you. I thank you for putting me behind bars and your kindness toward me. And I'm going to come back and show you the great things I've done, just like you had told me. And that's what we really want to see when someone goes off to prison, because if we have been mean to them, all right, now some people deserve it. Okay, I'm not saying we should be, hand everybody a bouquet of roses when they go to prison. But if we let them know they matter and that this shouldn't define them, and if they've done all these bad things, they certainly can do good things. They come out and at least try. They're not angry. They're not going to blow up our schools and our movie theaters. And sometimes when the prosecutor says this person isn't worthy, they need to go to prison, and I hear the backstory, I say, this is not their failure. This is our failure. What happened to rehabilitation? They're humans. So I put them on probation, and I address the fact that they were assaulted as a child, the fact that they grew up without a mom and a dad who was drunk, or whatever the issue is. Sometimes they need to go to, most people I send to cognitive behavioral. Sometimes they simply need to go to grief therapy and really address what happened. There's a lot of trauma in childhood, as we know, but when it's not addressed, it surfaces kind of like that ugly pimple on the forehead. It is going to burst. And, really, right? And so it bursts in the form of hurting other people, because hurt people hurt people. Mm-hmm. And so if we can go back and we can look at those issues and help them understand that this wasn't their fault, and this crime spree is a cry for help, and they can overcome it, and they do matter, and we care about them. We save lives. So I always try to do that. Now, it's not always possible. I have had to send many people to prison for life because they simply cannot walk with the rest of us. But where you find a human being who wants to be rehabilitated, who never got the chance, and you tell them they're worthy, they come back repeatedly and say, you were the first person who told me I mattered. Can you imagine being told that? Mm-hmm. And with victims, when I say, what would you like me to know and how can I help? And they tell me their story. Many times victims come to court and I'm the first person they trust to tell me what happened. And even though somebody in their life, or even a whole bunch of people, might have known what happened, they don't give them the detail that I get. And countless people come up to me and say, how did you do that? Even lawyers will say, may I approach? I talked to my client. I talked to the victim. The victim's advocate will say, I talked to the victim a dozen times. How did you get that person to talk? That's really simple. You have to give them a safe space. You cannot ask questions that shame, that blame, that cut them off, that make them feel somehow guilty because they're already feeling that. You simply have to open the door and let them walk through it and know that your arms are open wide. And how do I do that? What would you like me to know? How can I help?
And I've seen you in the courtroom do that and seen how these people have really opened up, and they share more than what they would share with their therapist, even in some cases and stuff. And it's really just being present and asking them those open-ended questions, like you said.